About 10 years after leaving residency and becoming an internal medicine physician, I noticed something that made me depressed. The job of an internist is to be a generalist and follow medical problems throughout a lifetime, hopefully reversing them as they come along. But they're usually a collection of problems that are not bad enough to see a specialist. So patients would come to me suffering with many problems, and well, I'd try to help them reverse the problems with healthy behaviors, things that would not require me. But oftentimes by the end of the visit, I'd find myself reciting the guidelines and send them out the door with a handful of prescriptions off to see the pharmacist. This is called standard of care, and we had about 20 minutes per patient to get the job done. As you might expect, they did not get better. That handful of prescriptions was how you manage diseases, not how you get to the core problem and reverse them. As an internist, you typically adopt a subspecialty, and this is an area of special interest that you go on for further training. I was very interested in the neuroscience, how brains that were injured were being healed. And I saw a particular struggle in those who had addiction along with their brain injury. I saw it everywhere. There was this church pastor who had type 2 diabetes and had a particularly difficult childhood. And every time he struggled with the memories of that childhood, he found himself comforted by, food, of course. There was a photographer who had brain fog and depression, and he had a self-soothing ritual called ice cream. Almost without exception, the addiction of food seemed to be in every patient who was struggling with these chronic health problems. And then the constant churn, the same type of problems over and over again with the same type of solutions in the form of a prescription, well, it weighed on me. 20 minutes is not enough time to get the patient to trust you, to share this traumatized history where they were fueling their addiction or soothing their past with the most available, cheapest drug on the planet, sugar. And my prescription was doing nothing to heal them. That made their labs a little better, but did not reverse their problem. And then I got depressed. I attended a few too many premature funerals where my prescriptions did not prevent that death. And I started to find myself getting very angry, that I was angry at the patient for just not listening to me, not doing what was very obviously the cause of their problem was the food that they shouldn't be eating. It was clearly killing them, and why couldn't they just stop? And then it happened to me. An imploded medical clinic left me and my family in a trailer park, and as the overwhelming stress ballooned my BMI, I could see what was happening, but I couldn't stop it. I have this fond memory as a rural farm kid where the Swans man would drive down a dirt road called my driveway. And I knew the day that truck came that our family would be spending extra time at the supper table with a bowl full of cherry nut ice cream. And I reached for that comfort over and over again when one bad day turned into the next. The ice cream seemed to make me feel better. And then the bad days came one after the next, and I just couldn't seem to stop despite knowing what the scale was doing. And then the stress compounded when my mom's cancer came back. The last round of chemotherapy left her gray and dull and void of any of the vibrance that I had known her to be. And she said to me, I refuse to do chemo again. I'd rather die. And at that time, we reached for keto, and we did a ketogenic diet together. And it really helped. Her cancer quickly improved, and I lost 10 pounds. I still had about 20 to go. But I couldn't get that off, and I didn't even care why. I just felt better. And Mom and I had a great first 6 months of the ketogenic diet. Not only was her cancer improved, but we were using every fat bomb recipe and every sugar substitute to fill the void of the removal of sugar with something close enough. So even though it said keto, I was not in ketosis. So I was stuck. Yeah, that 20 extra pounds was not moving. Now, I was definitely enjoying the fat bombs, and my macros all said that I was in the keto range, but I was not making ketones anymore. And I was already really suffering about giving up my sugar, my friend called the white stuff. So I wasn't enthusiastic about giving up the substitute for the sugar, even if it meant that that is how you'd get in ketosis. I realized that I was struggling with the exact same thing, trying to make excuses the same way my patients were. You know, the ones I was getting angry at because they wouldn't do what I told them was obvious to do. Yeah, I was addicted to food. And I was not willing to admit to myself that I was being dependent on a substance for my emotional well-being. I mean, how fragile, right? So my mom and I took it to the next level. We said, all right, let's practice the nothing burger. Yeah, fasting. And we're going to do it regularly because we're really bad at this. So we started with a 36-hour fast once a week. And once we succeeded at that, we went to 48 and sometimes even longer. And we did pretty good. We shaved off a few more pounds, and we both started to realize there were some components of emotional healing that we were addressing as we started to fast. But the plateau returned. We both broke our stall, but it wasn't the fasting that was the ultimate solution. If there's only two things you take away from this video, let them be the following. Number one, we did not do this alone. Fasting is difficult, but it was really difficult the first couple of times. And it made such a difference to know that I was doing this to help my mom, and she was probably thinking the same thing about me. So I didn't want to fail on behalf of her. I knew that if I succeeded, then she would succeed. And patients who break that stronghold of addiction, they don't do it alone. They have a friend or a support group that routinely helps them continue on the path forward. That was a huge deal. And second, we practiced healthier coping mechanisms. This was not so easy at first. That comfort of the food was really ingrained in who I was. And every time I got irritated or upset, I would head towards the fridge. So I learned that before the fast started, I had to write down 10 coping skills that I could do. I learned to play a game with my husband. I learned to go for a walk. I put things on the list that I would do in substitute of opening the fridge door and filling my pie hole with food that didn't belong there. So at first I used those coping skills just during the fasting cycles, but then I found myself having habits that, showed up when I was eating. And it was those same coping mechanisms that were the foundation to my improvement. And as my identity shifted, that I was really good at this puzzle game with my husband, as I became the person who walked the dog first, I found that identity really solid, and it became even more prominent than my identity as the farm kid who liked the cherry nut ice cream. If you made it this far into the video, you must resonate with that story. That you, like me, are probably not perfect. And as I continue to chisel away at those bad habits and improve them, I particularly focus on those habits twice a year. I do it during the course called the 21-Day Metabolic Kick. And it is a live course. That means I'm live and you have to show up live on the Zoom calls. This class transcends the changes that I could have gotten behind the exam room door. I take patients and I call them students in the class, and I can improve their health more in those 3 weeks than I could have done in 2 years of seeing them as a patient one-on-one. Why? Because we are really diving in to the change of behavior in that class. And yes, we practice an advanced ketogenic diet, and we will teach you the tips and tricks and some of the medical things that I think people should know about when doing a ketogenic diet. But most importantly, you're going to look in the mirror and see a version of you that's healthier within 3 short weeks. I know that happens to me every class. Yes, it's still happening. I'd love to see you there. Check out the link below.